I'm not used to seeing you all in the morning, but here we are. And looks like everybody is on time. So I'm Supervisor Monica Montgomery Stepp, co-chairing today's Reinvestment Task Force meeting with Council Member Henry L. Foster III. Welcome. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 9:04 a.m. And we'll just briefly have all of the members just go around a quick round robin and introduce yourselves before we go to non-agenda public comment. We'll start with Mr. Reed.
Good morning, I'm Jared Hernandez, and I'm the Executive Director at CSA San Diego County Fair Housing.
Good morning, Sarah Buchanan, San Diego Housing Federation's Executive Vice President.
Good morning, everyone. Enrique Mesa, I'm with US Bank.
Good morning, Adolfo Ventura with MAC.
Peter Armstrong with Wakeland Housing and Development Corporation.
District 4, San Diego City Council.
Daisy Crompton, San Diego Housing Commission. I'm staff to the Reinvestment Task Force.
Irene Guayo with IRC.
Angela Zappia, Director of Development with Accessity.
Good morning, Antonio Barbosa, Wells Fargo.
Good morning, Sergio Caro with Citibank, U.S. Community Relations. I do apologize. I have a hard stop shortly after 10 a.m., so apologize to the chairs and everyone in the room.
Hi, I'm Jimmy. I'm with Liz San Diego. I'm the Lendium Housing Program Officer.
Thank you so much, everyone. And wherever possible, we're trying to use the mics so that YouTube, are we on YouTube?
The live stream, yes.
The live stream.
And
everyone can hear us, so that's why we're using them. So thank you so much for those quick introductions. Let's move on to item number 2, which is non-agenda public comment. Is there any non-agenda public comment today? Okay. Okay, so that allows us to move forward to item number 3. Do we have any task force member comments at this time? Any announcements? Okay. I know we're going to have a very robust discussion around the federal update, so I think a lot of what can be said there. I want a quick update. On April 8th, the Board of Supervisors will be hearing the second reading of an item that originally last year I brought forward last April, and County Council came back to us with an ordinance, and that was to stop the predatory lending and exploitative practices as a result of the floods on January 22nd. I know we all saw a lot of that, had different examples of that, and so we moved forward something at the county that when there is an emergency declaration, that there are certain practices that have to stop in our communities, right, for as long as that declaration is on the books. And so the second reading is April 8th, so we're happy to have that in place so that as these things come up, we are not being as reactive as we have had to be through COVID and through the floods, but we're trying to take a proactive approach. Yes. Oh, okay, Peter has something. So we'll send that out to you, Daisy, in the event that anybody wants to see it. Also, Peter, yes, please.
So one thing I think I'd like to make folks aware of, and it doesn't fit under federal advocacy, it's maybe state advocacy. Obviously, the floods of January 22nd of last year were very impactful, obviously impacting low and moderate income census tracts. Lots of, black and brown folks were impacted dramatically. The state is proposing some funding for disaster areas, and I think it's on their mind of the horrible LA fires. But I think, this might be the opportunity for San Diego folks to advocate with our state elected and appointed folks at the State Department of California Department of Housing and Community Development, and maybe just get on the radar of our, legislative delegation because they're going to be allocating resources to redress and mitigate some of the disaster impacts. Wakeland had a property that was pretty impacted by those floods. I know other affordable developers and owners had impacts. Chicano Federation, for one, I know had a property that was pretty impacted. So I think there's an opportunity for us to maybe advocate for some resources that come to San Diego. And in the mindset of, how can we better react to disasters that are going to be happening more and more frequently, I would like to think about if there's a legislative or policy framework where if there is a state or a federal declaration of emergency that resources flow, or if there's a budget allocation that is made that resources flow to those impacted areas. And it's maybe naive, but to think that it's not, just a ad hoc case by case political advocacy process, that there's something more formal in place that distributes those resources.
Thank you for that. I have a whole lot of feedback that I won't go through right now, that being there directly and having everyone at the table, the feds, the state, county, the city, one of the issues is that everybody has to be rowing in the same direction, and that doesn't always happen, right? And it certainly didn't happen during the floods, but maybe we can put that on the agenda at some point. But you're absolutely right about the state having a particular interest in Los Angeles. I happen to believe that it's also because the Olympics are supposed to be here, but we can take advantage of that regardless of the reason. So thank you so much for mentioning that. So if there are no other comments at this time, we will move on to item number 4, which is the approval of the minutes for our last meeting, which was November 7th. If there are no other changes that need to be made, then we can go ahead and I will entertain a motion for these minutes. Okay. The co-chair has moved the item.
Second.
Thank you so much for the second. If there's no further discussion, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Oh. Okay, one abstention. Okay. All right, so that passes with one abstention. Okay. Daisy, you're up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our new co-chair. Very excited to have him here. We have a new official member as well. Angela, after years of serving as an alternate for Accessity, is now the official commissioner from Accessity. So welcome, and welcome to all of our alternates. And thank you for being here. We really appreciate your making the time and putting in the work, as we do with all of our commissioners as well. Today, we're voting on the calendar for this year. Every year, we do have to do it at the beginning of the year once we know who our co-chairs are. Sharp eyes have noticed that we've gone back to a monthly schedule up to 10 times a year, which is what the RTF did for 40 years until we started taking on more collective action projects and having work groups that were meeting in the alternate months. But since those have wound down, and since we last year kept running out of time, we were having such great discussions, we're going to pare back agendas, just do maybe 2 items, 2 substantive items versus 3, and then have more meetings so we have more time to discuss things. Our other guest speakers have done really good, quick research that we're excited to hear about in terms of the impacts locally and what's been happening as a result of what's happening in Washington. And we will also hear an update and action plan for the legislative platform we discussed before. And then one webinar I heard about people might be interested in, and also a bit of research out of the San Francisco Fed. We here are often talking about how do you expand production of housing, whether it's multifamily, affordable, or any market rate where it's home ownership or rental. They did a research piece where they quantified in the Western region, which is 12 Western states, how many ADUs, condos, tenancy in common are available for purchase, and looked at all of those as an opportunity for better entry-level for sale housing. So I'll post that link on the website, send it out to y'all. They're doing a webinar to kind of go over it real fast. Next Tuesday, March 25th from 1 until 2:30. I will also post that link on the RTF's meetings page under this meeting. That's the staff report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any comments, any feedback from the members at this time? I'm just assuming there's no public comment for this item. Okay. Seeing none, thank you so much, Daisy, as always. And we will go on to the next item, which, of course, is what you mentioned in your staff report. This is our calendar for the year. Let me just stop and say I'm going to take one item out of order and just move the platform up before we have the discussion on the federal government, just so we can have as much time as possible for that last discussion. And I also have a hard stop at 11, though, not 10. So I should be here for it all, but I just want to make sure that we have the time and close out with that discussion. So moving to item number 6 at this time. Yes, we're going back to somewhat of our monthly meetings. If there is no discussion or no changes on this, I can entertain a motion at this time. Okay. Thank you, Co-Chair. You have a motion.
Second.
And we have a second. Okay, awesome.
Peter.
From Peter. Are any other discussion? If none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, we have a calendar. And that's a huge step for us. Okay, let's move to the legislative item. I'm going off of my own script here. Yes, this is an action item. This is the RTF Legislative Platform and Program. I'm going to invite Eric Henson and Karen Montufar up to the desk and have them follow up from our last discussion that we had on this. This really came from a desire to have a plan for RTF moving forward. We've been really doing a lot of work, and we're very successful on some of our collective programs. We know we may have to take a look at those again with some of the changes at the federal government, but be that as it may, we still have to move forward, and we still have to look at the long game. This is something that I believe will pass. I don't know when, but it will. And as we move forward, it's important to keep our values intact, no matter how we phrase what we phrase, right? That our values are still intact. So I'll turn it over to Eric and Karen for the presentation and get public comment and come back to the members for discussion.
Good morning, everybody. Some folks here are new, but this item itself is not new, as the supervisor had noted. First, just want to mention this came about mainly just because we know that there's a lot of activities that encompass the Community Reinvestment Act, and just to encourage that spirit of like being proactive. I presented this legislative platform to kind of inform some of the items like that could even come to the board, down the pipeline, but also just to see how much we can actually like implement. And we have had some additional conversations, not just with task force members, but even our county government affairs team, as of yesterday, gave us some insight as to ways they can support us. We'll go into that later, but I'd like to get us started. This is the agenda, and just real quick, as far as like the outline, we'll go over, what is the legislative platform? Why does Reinvestment Task Force need that platform? What does it look like? And the challenges and opportunities. Some of those things that we spoke about on the government affairs side, and thanks Daisy for some of the support regarding San Diego Housing Commission staff and what their role is in the platform as well. And just some questions and next steps, and obviously adopting the legislative platform. And we'll get started. So, again, last time we were here, one thing that was mentioned was that, in the research of looking at various legislative platforms, there really, is no universal definition. But upon looking at other jurisdictions, platforms, some keywords that kept reoccurring, was monitoring state and federal legislation. Also, something from the California League of Cities. It mentions right here, respond in a timely manner to new legislation introduced at the state and federal levels. And then, SANDAG up here, I think they have some, objective, points of view as to why, we have a legislative platform to also secure funding and also push that support for moving certain items forward. So here's some, examples. As I said, there really is no universal definition of a legislative platform, and you can even see from the snapshots up here how they're outlined. So even though this is more about aesthetics as well, when we decided to go forward with a platform, we wanted something that was readable and digestible to the public, because just in our passing and working with the supervisor in our capacity when we were at the city, people were often interested in knowing what the Reinvestment Task Force was. People are familiar with CRA, but not the task force itself. So we were thinking about the audience that we would be targeting, beyond the board members here as well. So we actually used MTS's template, borrowed from them a little bit, because if you look at it again aesthetically, it mentions the local, state, and federal, and the tables are like broken down into various categories. And some, while it's great, we definitely want to focus on the content, but in terms of accessibility, this is why we were inspired by the MTS template for the platform. So why do we need the legislative platform for Reinvestment Task Force? Here's just a quick overview. As we know, the Community Reinvestment Act was established in 1977. There have been some recent, like rule changes that are related to the Community Reinvestment Act testing and, activities, and even in this current social climate now, there's a lot of other implications that will happen with the Community Reinvestment Act. But just for some timeline considerations, on October 24th of 2023, Fed Reserve and some of the other, implementing departments under that, issued their final rule, and the final rule begins January 1st of 2026. And then some of the remaining new requirements for CRA will be applicable on January 1st, 2027. These are just some high-level ones. I won't go over each one, but expansion of facility assessment areas. I know some of this has to do with like commercial activities related to the Community Reinvestment Act. Right here, you also see community development financing tests now includes native land areas and weather resiliency financing. Considering the stuff that's happening with EPA right now, I hope that's not, the case that will delay that, but these are some things to consider, and special purpose credit programs and retail lending test revisions. And again, here's some activities that are associated with CRA. Some funding sources, outside of HUD that we need to consider. Maybe, every time I see some things on the federal level, there's always that uncertainty, but, and ideally we'd like to see more coordination with United States of Economic Development Administration, even leveraging that down to the state level version of that. Like some parts of the country have like economic development districts. I know the county has like a working paper on something related to that. And, when we engage with our economic development and government affairs team at the county, we can elaborate on that more in the future. And then here are some of the other state departments and environmental justice initiatives and other housing programs that are outside of federal. And what would a reinvestment task force platform look like for the legislative activities? Some potential program areas, affordable housing and desegregation, supporting small business and economic development, consumer education and counseling. I won't go over the last two, but these are all the different sections that the platform is broken down into. So some of you have the hard copy there to look at. Some of these goals are actually from the City of San Diego's Economic Development and Government Affairs team and the platform that they presented in 2024 and 2025. So some of these are city goals and some of the other ones that we've seen in other agencies for different categories as well.
Hi, good morning, everyone. So as Eric mentioned, you all have the final 2025 legislative program in front of you. One of the major feedbacks that we received from you all was just how we were going to actualize the legislative program. So before you, we have 3 action items. A, to approve the Reinvestment Task Force legislative program with a list of priority issues. B, requesting that intergovernmental relations staff at San Diego Housing Commission, the city, the county work with the Reinvestment Task Force in support of the Reinvestment Task Force platform. And 3, delegate authority to the RTF co-chairs to send letters of support on platform issues and or when a quick turnaround is required. So that kind of breaks down into 4 different issues. The co-chairs have the authority to bring any issue to the RTF for discussion and or vote of support. B, support letters sent from the RTF as a whole will be preceded by an RTF vote. C, letters sent without accompanying discussion at the RTF will be signed by them as the co-chairs of the RTF and not implicitly or explicitly from the RTF as a whole. And finally, D, the co-chairs will share with the RTF copies of all letters after they send them. So those are the actions and the vote that we're looking to get from you all today. And that concludes our presentation. We are open to any questions.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Do we have any public comment on this item at all? Okay, thank you so much. Let's go to our members. Any initial feedback or motions? If there's no discussion, I think I have a couple things, but I want to.
At the Federation, we've been talking about this and really find that this is a great opportunity for coalition building and really think that this is a positive thing for the RTF to get behind. So we personally and professionally both stand for this.
Thank you. Is that a motion?
Yes, you have a motion.
Great. Other members, any discussion? Peter?
I'll second the motion.
Okay. I think as you all do that, one thing that Peter did mention was just the advocacy around disaster relief. And I think we can add that. I know some of the topics are broad enough to where we could squeeze that in there, but I think if we add that, if you both are okay with that, just add a line about advocacy around disaster relief. I think just kind of keep it a little broad right now because that could mean a lot of things, right? So that would give us permission to explore that at the state and federal levels. There will be a lot of advocacy at the state level around this time, but we'll fit in wherever we can on every level, right? Anything else? Any feedback from anyone else?
Oh, may I ask a question, Supervisor?
Yes.
Do you want that as its own standalone category or within the categories listed here? Because I do think there is that opportunity for looking at things like, climate investment, environmental as well.
And then now I'm looking at Oh, this is not numbered, the slide right before the action slide in those program areas.
Yeah.
And then,
Two areas, so I think it would make sense to make an additional.
I think so too. I think an additional area. We just want to make sure that it, is clear, that we're going after that specifically, especially because it's the hot topic right now.
Right. I think that's good.
Okay, all right. Anything else? Yes, Antonio.
Yeah, I want to just mention that I think because reading here some of the language and the advocacy, I think for some of us, we can end up incurring in being judge and jury. So I think in some cases, banks are going to have to abstain from some recommendations because we will have to take it for legal for approval. So just want to mention that.
Do you want to parse that out now, or are you going to abstain from the platform?
I think I'm going to abstain. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. I'm assuming that most of the nonprofits can go move forward today, and the banks may have some. Yes, Sergio.
Thank you. To build on Antonio's comment, can there be clarity around like exactly when letters without accompanying discussion at the RTF, perhaps a scenario that they may arise, knowing that our new calendar will be on now that we have like a monthly type of calendar cadence, just so then when we present it on our end to our internal stakeholders, we have a bit more clarity on that.
Yeah, that's a good point. We can turn to Daisy, but before I do, I just want to talk about intent.
Oh, okay.
The intent is never to move forward without an RTF vote, right? At the end of the day, if we want to support something, we're both elected officials, and we can do that, right? But I think bringing the Reinvestment Task Force along, anytime there's a coalition, a group of folks that are standing together, that's extremely important. But the intent is not to sort of use the name of the RTF, kind of willy-nilly, so to speak. But it is, if there's something that comes up that that we've had discussions about, that is listed on the platform, and that there's an emergency situation, then we want to be able to utilize the name. But I'll turn it over to Daisy.
Thank you. One brief example. So maybe 3 weeks ago, when Congress was working on budget reconciliation, National Community Reinvestment Coalition had a sign-on letter supporting Treasury Department funding for CDFIs. So that's pretty easy, right? But it had a 1-week turnaround. So we didn't have the platform in place. We did not end up signing on in any way. But that's the kind of thing. As the co-chair said, that intent is not by any means a workaround or anything like that.
I mean, maybe to make our banking friends more comfortable, I think the primary thing that that their legal folks are probably concerned about is CRA implementation, new policies of that type. I mean, I think support for CDFIs or the Section 4 funding, I think most folks and most bankers are probably okay with that type of action. I mean, maybe we could qualify, we're not going to send comments on, new CRA reform without a discussion, for instance.
We can let's make that a part of the motion and not necessarily, I don't think it needs to be listed in the platform.
Right, or the motion.
Or the motion, okay. I mean, I'm fine with either. I mean, this is part of the reason why we even brought this forward is so that we could have this discussion. Because we especially if we're going to be meeting monthly, we get a lot of really informative, helpful updates. But as a task force, we really have not taken a lot of action like this. And so that tension needs to be brought up, right? Because we have to all figure out in the times that we're about to be confronted with, what we can do together and what the purpose of us meeting is. Like that's really, that is, as we move forward, it just needs to be here. We don't have time anymore. We at the county right now, just as an example, We are estimating so far we get about $1.3 billion of our budget from the federal government by way of the state being the vessel, and then us being the public health agency. We are facing people being cut from Medi-Cal, from SNAP, CalFresh, from TANF, from HUD rental assistance. That's what we're facing right now. And so with this this convening, we have to, I think every space that I want to be in, I want to be moving forward someplace. And that is not, that we need each other. It's just we have to make sure that we're being productive and moving in a direction that's going to be helpful to folks who are going to be struggling, we anticipate, as early as the fall. Right? These are very low income people. And so that's a bigger picture, doesn't necessarily have to do directly with this, but I just want everyone to know like where we are coming from, myself and my office, that, this is, the spaces that I sit in right now are going to have to be progressing, moving forward, and figuring out how we're going to help people in the times that we are in. And the best way to do that, I think, is focus. So we can add that, and then I'll turn it over to the co-chair.
Thank you, and thank you for the comments, co-chair. And as this is my first day and not familiar with process, protocol, and so forth, so correct me if I ask something that's out of line, please, or do something. But Antonio, I think as we talk about our banking friends and trying to be in a good place, if you can, as I review these, I'm a little unclear as to the hesitation. Is it the platform, or is it the action items of writing the letters? Because as I look at the platform, I'm a little perplexed as to why there would be an issue based on the items that are noted as part of our advocacy efforts. So if you can elaborate and help me to better understand, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah. Thank you. I think to me,
and I'm going to say this too, and I want to make sure we're clear as we're doing business, right? I like to think we have the proper people at the table that have the authority to make decisions or not make decisions. If we don't, then that's something I think as a body we need to make sure that we address, because I want to make sure we're productive as I'm spending my time here and we're moving the needle and addressing the issues that we need to address.
Right? Yeah, right. So, and I think at this time is both. And I didn't have time to present this to the people that can give me the authorization. You're right that you should be the ones being able to say yes or no at this moment. This was something that, with so many changes that are happening at the federal government, right now it's difficult to get some authorization like this one. But I can promise for the next one I will be ready to have a response.
Okay, I appreciate that. And again, I'm just looking at this, if it says we're going to advocate for measures to enhance the viability of housing through community land trust, doesn't seem like that's a difficult legal conversation, right? If we're talking about furthering fair housing, doesn't seem like it should be a difficult conversation or advocacy conversation, right? So if you can, I'm just trying to, and I want to take this opportunity to understand where everyone is at. So, right, and I think this is the time to have the conversation, as we said. If there's something problematic, what is it? Is there anything problematic as part of the platform?
Well, the platform is CRA, and as you know, with CRA regulates banks. So that's kind of so everything is connected to CRA. So that's why I need to get confirmation.
Okay. Will do. Thank you.
All right, so any other discussion? All right, so we do have a motion and a second on the floor. We don't need any kind of voice vote, do we? They can do all in favor and abstention and all opposed, like we normally do. Voice vote meaning calling out each task force member.
I just need to know the numbers.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
I don't need to know
so maybe
what,
raising hands?
Yeah.
That'll help you? Okay. All in favor, please raise your hand and keep it up for Daisy to count. 2, 3, 2 co-chairs? Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Thank you so much, and we'll just be continuing to use this throughout the year, and any feedback from all of our partners here at the table, always warranted. You can certainly reach out to Daisy, but also to the Office of the Co-Chairs as well, just to provide any additional feedback, if that's okay with you, Councilman Burke. Okay, all right. Let us move to our last item, and I'm very excited. We're going to have some. Thank you so much, Eric and Karen. I know this is. You've been working on it quite a bit. Yes, sir.
I'm trying to recall if I should stay up here since we
For
are.
the government report?
Yeah, or should
maybe
I?
come up, we'll let the other two first.
Okay.
Yeah, give you a break.
All righty. We're joined by Megan Thomas. Hello, hello, hello. President and CEO of Catalyst of San Diego and Imperial Counties. Catalyst has been tracking local impact and will share what they are seeing. And we will also hear from our task force members on impacts to budgets, clients, and communities. Thank you so much for being here and joining us. The floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having us, Chair, members. I'm also joined by my good friend, Christina, from the Nonprofit Institute at the University of San Diego. We have been working closely to leverage their research and connection to community to get some data on a running basis, as has been mentioned a number of times. The situation is changing quickly and frequently, so trying to get real-time information directly from the folks who are impacted is one of our priorities. So I'm actually going to hand it over to her first, just to level set us on where our communities are. And what you'll be hearing from us primarily is coming from the nonprofit sector, so the folks who are in the agencies who are working with communities to support their needs, to meet their needs, and who are, as you'll hear, largely funded by the federal government, either directly or indirectly. So she'll share some data, and then I'll talk a little bit about what's going on, about the things that we know in the communities, and then we'd welcome conversation. So with that, Christina.
Yeah. Hi, happy to be here this morning. And as Megan shared, we work directly with community, with nonprofit organizations throughout our county in capacity building, but we always have a balance of doing the work informed by research around the work and trying to understand how the over 13,000 nonprofit organizations in our county are experiencing their work. And the realities have been changing rapidly in recent months. And so we did do our annual State of Nonprofit survey last year and presented on that at our governance symposium in January. And so a little bit of the data that, just for context, that I'll share is from that. But also we conducted a federal impact survey with our nonprofit partners in February and are sharing that data with you today so that you can understand, within the past 60 days or so, how are nonprofit organizations experiencing just the first 2 months of the new administration. And so I'm going to say that the slide deck, I believe, is accessible to you. It is much longer than what I'm going to review with you. It's really, you can look at it as a report, right, that you can have access to and continue to look at on your own time. And always feel free to reach out to us. We want to be a resource for all of you. But I'm just going to cover some highlights for today. And so I will share that this is a team effort. I might jot down some questions if there's anything that you ask of me that I'm not able to respond to. But we do have a research team. There's even more individuals that are on the slides that contributed to this work. And we're also very grateful that for this particular federal impact survey, we had the partnership of all of these wonderful organizations, including Catalyst, to ensure that we were getting this survey out to as many of our partners in a very short time frame as possible so that we could be responsive and share that information out. And so I want to just remind everyone that the nonprofit sector is a force, both as a service provider and an employer in the county. There are over 13,000 organizations, nonprofit organizations of varying sizes in our county. And although you can see that it is less than 25% that actually have paid staff members, all of these organizations provide really essential services. And if you look at how some of our social services are structured in the county, this includes some really key areas like mental and behavioral health. The majority of mental and behavioral health is provided through nonprofit organizations in our county. And so we're really talking about essential services that also keep people who are already in critical need in other areas from falling further into a higher level of need, right? Also, these 3,153 organizations that have paid staff, this represents over 100,000 jobs in our community. Lots of families, lots of individuals that are doing work that they care about and that is meaningful to them without necessarily the same, not necessarily, without the same compensation that they would in the private sector. And so these families are also individuals that do not have vast savings, do not have stock options that if they're laid off, you're not talking about 6 months of severance for them to live off of. These federal impacts really mean that if the individuals that are providing services don't have employment, it's not just the services not being provided, it's also that if individuals lose their employment, it means that they are then going to also be in need of the services that they were previously providing because of that limited safety net that they have. So this is really a significant portion of our population and one that our community really relies on. One fact not included here is that in our survey last year, we found that 83% of those surveyed had some benefit from a nonprofit organization in the previous 12 months. And let me tell you, we know that because that question is just asked, not open-endedly, but just a kind of yes or no question, we know that that is potentially even higher because sometimes individuals don't recognize that the urgent care that they went to is actually part of a nonprofit hospital, or that the PTA that their child benefits from is a nonprofit organization as well. And so that 83% might be even higher, but it's already at a rather high level. And as you can see, these are services that really result in our community trusting the nonprofit sector, not trusting the nonprofit providers that they receive a whole range of services from. So we want to just highlight the fact that there is widespread concern in the nonprofit sector, in the 400 plus organizations that responded to our survey in February. There's widespread concern about everything from funding to having to change programming and not being able to provide services in the way that is most essential for our community. And there is just a great amount of uncertainty. The concern is really coming with a lot of anxiety because so much is unknown. We know that 72% of those organizations that were surveyed are already reporting that they have experienced or anticipate having a direct impact from federal actions. So this is really a significant portion because as Supervisor Stepp already mentioned, there's that flow down, right? It's not just that they might have a direct federal grant, but they might receive money from the state or another source that comes from the federal government, or also that they might have to change the way that they are providing services that might limit who can access them, and the need doesn't go away. Just because an immigrant population that is previously been served, you have to be more careful in how you serve them, doesn't mean that they stop needing a service. And so there is a great amount of uncertainty, a lot of fear, and I want to also mention that there's also a lot of requirements, so expectations being made, expectations of organizations without compensation at this point. We are talking to a lot of our nonprofit partners who are sharing that in order to remain in good standing with the state funding source or the federal funding source, they're having to continue to do the work. And because most government contracts are on a reimbursement basis, it's not just doing the work, it's doing the work without pay, without guarantee of that money ever being released, and without having access to individuals to answer their questions. Because of the layoffs that are happening, the firings, entire departments being shuttered means that there's literally no one answering the phone, no one responding to the emails. And so that anxiety is real. It's not paranoia. It's very real impacts that they're experiencing right now. So as you can see, just a month ago is when we closed the survey. We had over 400 responses, which is where we're basing this information off of. And the majority were executive directors that were really knowledgeable about how these federal actions are impacting their organization. And I'm just going to skip ahead to note that there is a high degree of awareness that there are lots of decisions being made that are going to impact their organization. But again, there's also a lot of uncertainty in knowing how to address these challenges. Because one thing that we did find in our survey last year is that there are less organizations outside of the environmental protection area that are involved in advocacy work than would ideally be the case, because they're really busy doing the work. They're not always involved in the coalitions or in the policy watch groups and really trying to understand actions. So they're receiving this information without necessarily knowing how to act on it, what they can do, who they can turn to for support. So that kind of heightens that anxiety and the instability that they're feeling. We're also seeing that there are a lot of organizations that are already having to make programmatic changes. So just in the survey, 41% said that they were already making changes, and then another 31% said that they anticipate making changes. A lot of the organizations that were immediately impacted, of course, were those working with certain populations, LGBTQIA plus community, immigrant population, individuals working in the environmental protection field. But others anticipate, everything from Head Start providers not knowing what in the world is going to happen to their funding, to, individuals that are working with seniors and that are working to provide greater access to medical, to health and emotional services for them. So we know that nonprofit organizations not only kind of work on a shoestring and really stretch funds, but also that means that they have less staff oftentimes in order to do more work with less money. And so very limited amounts of time do they already have to provide the services. One of the greatest impacts that we want to note is that being concerned about and trying to figure out what to do in response to these federal actions is really causing a strain that's not just emotional, it's logistical. It's that time. How do you spend time that you already don't have to research, to reach out, to figure out what to do in response to these federal actions? And because oftentimes, again, they're not getting any kind of responsiveness from government agencies at the federal level. They're having to really talk to one another, which is a good thing, but it's limited information. And so we're really seeing the benefit of anyone that does have greater policy and advocacy skill and knowledge, stepping in to try to fill some of those gaps and to direct individuals in different organizations, that is a very welcomed resource. That's a really great source of support for these organizations that are kind of diving into this space for the first time. And the interesting piece about the services that they are providing is that we are seeing that there are a few that are having to end programs entirely or change their services. But we also, I want to say just released, because we invited individuals to participate on a panel where they essentially get an additional question, one question every couple of weeks. We already are seeing that there are a lot of individuals talking about having to increase services. So it's counterintuitive. But remember, this is the nonprofit sector, not the for-profit sector. And really, we want to change the wording on that because it's really about a values and purpose-driven sector that wants to meet community need. And so when the community need is great, rather than say, we don't have the money, we're going to step back, organizations are oftentimes doing the opposite and are diving in. And so what we're seeing is that with same or less money, they are diving in to figure out other ways to provide services because the need is growing because of these federal actions. So we know that it's impacting not just organizations, but individuals in a really significant way. And as was mentioned earlier, some of that we haven't even seen, right? It's coming in the following months, and we're going to likely see a greater need. And the nonprofit community is there and is trying to figure out how to meet that need, but they're doing so at a time with that funding is limited, and where also some of the ways in which they can provide services while still keeping their community safe are also being impacted. This is a piece that I spoke to earlier, that it's not just that services being provided are going to shift, but I want to note that so far we have seen about 400 layoffs already occur, but there is 18% of our respondents that said that they expect that they might have to, in the coming months, lay off staff as well. And so that then grows that population that needs these essential services. Ooh, sorry, this is very sensitive. So my correction, 498, so nearly 500 employees have already been laid off or furloughed. So those that are maybe not familiar with the sector might wonder, where is this instability coming from, that one period of disruption funding might create such havoc? The reality for the nonprofit sector is even those that have diversified funding sources, there's a lot of limitations to the funding and how they can apply it. Foundations, for the most part, provide only 1 year of funding. So it's a year to year. If you have even any percentage of your funding as a nonprofit organization provided by a foundation, even if it's a large grant, it's very beneficial to have that grant for that 1 year, but then you can't count on it the next year. And some might even have restrictions on whether you can reapply, right? There are some that do fee for service where they have sliding scales. But again, if those individuals that are accessing services are also individuals that are seeing their income limited, that are seeing any of their benefits impacted, or simply that it's been a higher cost of living situation for some time that's gotten worse in recent months. I don't know if anyone's had to purchase eggs. Obviously, that's been a huge issue for families. And so that higher cost of living means that you're going to cut out those fees for any service wherever you can, which means that even those that really need a service might not come and access it, which also then decreases not the need for it, but the revenue and then the seeking of services for organizations. And then government has actually historically been a place where we have encouraged nonprofit organizations to turn, because we know that the government does need a lot of services to be provided by nonprofit organizations, and that it has tended to be multi-year and more stable funding. Well, we're seeing that rug pulled right out from underneath organizations, and that is part of why they're really facing such difficult conditions right now financially. They have built up reserves thanks to some COVID funding. A lot of them are at least entering this period of time in greater financial stability than they were prior to 2020. But this is still very serious, and we did hear from organizations, and I'll just leave you with this. We did hear from organizations that have said, if cuts at the NIH stand as they are written, it will put us out of business. It's that serious, and we will be the same, and that will be the same for most independent research organizations. There are a lot of executive directors right now facing really difficult choices because they know that the need is there, but how they can continue to meet that need without asking already taxed staff to do more with less, and how to do that work and provide that service to the community that is scared and is sometimes afraid to even come and access those services. These are really challenging times for them in doing that. So thank you very much. I'm going to hand it back over to Megan.
Okay, thank you, Christina. It's good to be with you all here today. We always have to find our bright spots, because otherwise, how do we go on? I tell folks I'm an eternal optimist, because otherwise you got to get up every day and believe you can make things better. So I was pleased to see among the many pieces of news running across my screens this morning that it happens to be the UN International Day of Happiness. So we can all take a brief breath and enjoy the fact that there is still a celebration of happiness to be had. It's good to see so many friends and colleagues that I've worked with over the last 20 plus years, and many of whom are members of, I almost said San Diego Grantmakers, Catalyst of San Diego and Imperial counties, including, I will say, all of you are a part of our network, because the San Diego Housing Commission is a member of Catalyst, and we greatly appreciate Daisy's robust participation in the work that we do. So just to briefly talk about who we are, and then I'm going to go, there are more words in this slide deck than I usually like to use, but I want to make sure you have it after the fact. So we'll go quickly through, I want to sort of tell a story, right? Set up why things are the way they are, how we got here, what has happened in this sort of spiraling, laddering series of events that presents us with the situation we have today. So Catalyst as an organization, next year will be our 50th anniversary. We've been around since 1976, when I think of a lunch bunch got together, a handful of folks, many of whom are still in the community today working for social change, decided it would be good to get together and talk to one another. Today we have between 75 and 100 members of all stripes. So some government agencies, private foundations, community foundations, giving circles, anybody who's moving financial resources towards the community is a welcome member of our organization. I would say that when we were founded, we thought of ourselves as a neutral convener, right? A place where we would bring folks together without sort of what's a better way of saying dog in the fight? A card on the table, I don't know. Today, I think of us as an issue agnostic but values-driven organization. So we have a set of values that includes collaboration, equity, and bold leadership. And so those are the the touchstones that we come back to when we're doing our work. How do we do our work? You can sort of read these things. We bring folks together. We help them work collaboratively. We try to bring more resources into the region than we're already here. And we'll kind of go back to that at another point in this presentation because I think it's an important way we can all be working together. And we are a go-to source for reliable, consistent information for our members and others. As I stumbled over my words earlier, we were founded as San Diego grantmakers, thinking about San Diego County as the geographic region where we seek to have our impact. We've evolved into thinking about the border region, right? Our people, our economy, our culture, our environment, it all moves north, south, east, and west. What brings me here today is this, our first action in response to what began to change after the inauguration was to begin publishing a weekly policy brief. So these are all on our websites, and it was just a way to start to make sense, to do some sense making for our community. And the orientation for that is on the financial impacts, where philanthropy can help make a difference in the community's ability to respond. But of course, everything sort of has a financial impact. So you'll see information about staffing, about changes to agencies, about community impacts, all those sorts of things. So our members contribute about $1 billion per year into the community, which feels really good, sounds great. We're about to talk about many billions of dollars. So I think trying to think about scale and where can we intervene as individuals, as organizations, as agencies and governments starts to point a flashlight at what actions we might take. When I think about your advocacy platform, that's one of the lenses I feel like is an important one, is how do we take small actions that can have a multiplying effect. Okay. So what's going on? I think some of the things that I'm describing here you'll be very familiar with, others maybe not. Please feel free to stop me as I'm speaking. I know we have a Q&A at the end, but if anything is confusing, and this is all a bit confusing, I'm happy to provide more information. So the kind of 5 areas that we're seeing as disruptors to how we're operating as a community. One, and sort of very notorious, is the federal funding freeze. It's sort of what kicked all of this off, along with the last bullet in that, an attack on DEI-connected activities, right? Subsequently, we've seen the elimination of federal funds. We've seen staff reductions. And something that I think is important to understand as well, and it goes back to what Christina was describing about the executive director in the research institution, process changes. So I'm referring in particular to NIH funding in the billions of dollars was first frozen, and then the judge ruled you can't do that, you have to unfreeze it. But what the administration did after that was to make process changes that disallowed certain meetings, reviews, and other links in the chain that made it impossible to get the funds out. So the funds were there, but you couldn't have the review meeting that would then authorize those funds to be spent. So those are important sort of nuanced things that may or may not show up in most stories. Big issue of contention, the power of the purse, right? I'm probably not telling you anything you don't know, but a lot of the lawsuits that are out there right now have to do with whether or not the executive branch has the authority to make these decisions when these are congressionally authorized allocations of money. So if we see, and this is the sort of like day-to-day washing machine churn of trying to keep up with what's going on, we see sort of a test and refine sort of going on. So most recently, a couple of days ago, and I'm going to come back and talk about this particular executive action from the 14th, which has a big impact on you all, so you're probably familiar with it. But you see this continuing reduction of the federal bureaucracy doesn't try and eliminate these government agencies. It says you must go in and examine and find out any non-statutory, so any non-congressionally mandated activities, and eliminate those. Keep the congressionally mandated activities, but otherwise stop. All right, so we'll talk about the details of that, but just to see sort of this back and forth activity that's happening at the federal level that makes it so hard to keep up. Okay, so this is where I said there's a lot of words, and I'm going to go a little quickly because we want to get to the impacts locally, but I think it's important to just sort of see what's been happening over the last 2 or 3 months. So, inauguration took place, and within that first week, we saw executive orders that said, you have to terminate preferencing and direct agencies to combat private sector discrimination. So this was saying within contracting processes, we were going to eliminate anything that sounds like diversity, equity, and inclusion. A couple days later, same thing happened for federal grants. And what we saw was, I can give a particular example, there's an organization called Kids Included Together that's based here. They have some federal funding. Their work is to promote inclusive practices for kids with disabilities or other challenges so that they can be educated in a good way. So they have some federal funding. They are not only not allowed to use federal funding for anything that speaks to inclusion, but they actually will be denied federal funding if any of their programs have that incorporated into it. So they had to rewrite and eliminate parts of their curriculum if they wanted to retain the federal funding that made their work possible. A week in, we start to see the pushback that is going to be characteristic of what is happening in our communities today as we're trying to retain and recover funding. There was this temporary pause of agency, et cetera, et cetera. So that was the first time you hear the federal funding freeze. Pause all funding to review for consistency with any executive action that was out there. A day later, the National Council on Nonprofits filed a lawsuit, and the judge issued an administrative stay. So mostly what you're going to see is there are lawsuits out there, and then the judge will issue an administrative stay or a temporary restraining order. So they're not ruling on the case, but they're saying there's enough here that I want to consider that we're going to say you can't do, the federal government can't do, or the administration can't do what it wants to do until I figure this out. The next day, the administration rescinded that executive order, recognizing one can presume that they weren't going to prevail in the lawsuit. A week later, the entire nonprofit sector is now going to be under scrutiny, right? So an executive order came out that said all agencies should review any nonprofit that they're funding to make sure that the work is aligned with the administration's goals. And in that executive order, it noted that many nonprofits actively undermine the security, prosperity, and safety of the American people, which we know, of course, is not true. Continuing in the lawsuits, we have a judge who temporarily blocked the termination of federal contracts just because they're related to some sort of equity action, and a new legal motion was brought by the National Council of Nonprofits. Despite the fact that there was an administrative stay on that funding freeze, Continuum of Care agencies, so this is our regional task force on homelessness, were unable to access the money that had already been awarded to them. And so this lawsuit was saying, you're not following the judge's orders, you need to release the funds to support our unhoused communities. March 8th, so a couple of weeks ago, Climate United sued the EPA and Citibank, which is holding the funds for this grant, for withholding monies that had been awarded through the Inflation Reduction Act. That was $7 billion nationally to administer clean energy projects in underserved communities. Locally, Self-Help Credit, well, nationally, Self-Help Credit Union, but for us locally, that was the partner that would have been administering those dollars. We're going to come back to this. There was $70 million in San Diego that right now have been lost due to the EPA funding freeze. More lawsuits, more restraining orders. I will give you all these slides. Okay, so this is what I mentioned earlier, this continuing reduction of the federal bureaucracy. This is recent, so what's that, a week ago, 6 days ago, we're going to start to talk about impacts in our region now. So this executive order ordered the variety of government entities to eliminate any non-statutory activities. That includes the Interagency Council on Homelessness. That includes the Community Development Financial Institutions Fund. And an interesting tidbit is that the Capital Magnet Fund, which finances the work of this body and oversees new market tax credits, on the same day as the order, they received 2,016 applications for new market tax credits worth $19 billion. That's twice what they have authorized to, twice their authority of $10 billion. It also concerns the Minority Business Development Agency and the Institute of Museum and Library Sciences, as well as a couple of others. So if you haven't looked into this one, you may want to give it a gander. Reduction in force, you can see the numbers there. A large portion of the folks who've been eliminated were just a blanket elimination of any employee on probationary status. This was some new employees. It also included employees who were in the process of changing roles within an organization, regardless of whether they'd been there for 20 years. Last week, a federal judge said you can't do that. You have to reinstate those folks. However, that doesn't mean they can't be eliminated. It just means the OMB doesn't have, the Office of Management and Budget doesn't have the authority. So there could be other ways to go around and do this. Yesterday, or maybe the day before now, the administration came out and said they're going to seek to eliminate the Department of Education. Immigration. I think Christina referenced this. So on, I think, the first day, maybe the second day of the new administration, asylum was halted. So we were seeing hundreds and sometimes 1,000 people a day entering the country through an asylum process. There's nobody coming anymore. In addition, the refugee resettlement program was eliminated. We have 4 refugee resettlement agencies in the region. You can see their logos there. They have, at this point, all laid off their resettlement staff. So even after, what was that, February 16th was the cutoff for the survey, there have been a couple hundred more layoffs on the basis of this funding elimination. That said, so I'm sure you all know how resettlement works, but right, so you come into the country, and what we have told these people is you come here, you get 90 days of support, we'll help you find jobs, we'll help you find housing, we'll help get your kids into school, and there's a cash assistance offered to help pay rent, get some groceries, get your feet on the ground. So we have about 1,000 people here now who came into the country, and then subsequently that program has ended. So these 4 agencies each have people that they are supporting, but they are not funded to do that. So that accounts for about $1 million in funds that should have been received that have not, and yet we still have the people here that need that support. So when Christina talked about organizations doing more, not just on a small budget, but now on no budget, and people expecting and needing those services, these are the sorts of things that we talk about. They're actually not able to receive funds that they billed for back to October. So it's not just that they're not getting new funds, it's that even if they had submitted an invoice, those are not going to be paid for awarded funds they were already told that they had. We hear nonprofits saying they're dipping into their reserves. And on a good day, a nonprofit on average in the region, you can help me, this is from the survey, I think has maybe 30 to 60 days of reserves in the bank. So you can imagine this isn't going to go far. It's also not a good strategy because these are the nonprofits providing critical services every day. So if we destabilize those organizations, we're going to be in a heap of trouble. I'm going to talk a little bit about that when we talk about what philanthropic funders are doing. EPA dollars, I mentioned this. So we have just what is known at the moment, at least $70 million that had been awarded that is now no longer available to these projects. Lots of housing and transportation, lots of disadvantaged communities, health projects. These are all really putting these projects in jeopardy. Casa Familiar, you're probably familiar, has a community land trust project. They're out $2 million. San Diego Foundation and EHC, they have $22 million in state funds that were complemented by a $20 million EPA grant. There were a dozen different projects, including funding, for example, to MTS to do some work with transit. That's all gone, unclear how that's going to be resolved. And then the International Community Foundation was the Region 9 administrator of a $50 million, $48 million technical assistance fund that was going to have offered $150,000 to $350,000 grants to dozens of nonprofits across the region. That's all but eliminated. And yesterday, there was an executive order that essentially says FEMA is now going to be put under scrutiny with the objective of moving responsibility for disaster preparedness and response to states and local government. It's International Happiness Day, folks. Remember that. Keep that in mind. Education. I didn't have a chance to talk to our friends at the district, but at least the San Diego Unified School District actually has a page up on their website where they are trying to track impacts, and at minimum they've lost about, I said not 12 billion, it's not quite that bad, $12 million, primarily in transportation. It was a green transportation grant to buy school buses for the district, as well as another smaller program. Okay, housing. Here's where you all maybe know more than I did, but we're going to get into this a little bit. And as I mentioned, I will share these slides, and we also have a more detailed sort of fact sheet that I will send along for you. So this is housing affordability in San Diego, the continuing resolution, right? So that the budget for the government that was passed funds them through September. And you will see that in some places it's being reported that there were budget increases to HUD, Housing and Urban Development. The problem is that those increases don't actually cover the increased expenses. So the net impact of the budget that was passed is a loss to HUD. Section 8 vouchers, of course, far outstrip the need. Here's what HUD does. I'm sure you're aware, but keep in mind that there has been a 50% reduction in the staff of this department. So the ability to execute on these responsibilities is going to be much reduced. Okay, how are we faring as a state compared to the rest of the country? Of course, we are a large state. We have a high population, so lots of impacts. $3.5 billion was added to the tenant-based rental assistance program. However, that program is so underfunded that only 1 in 4 households who qualify are receiving assistance. So this is number of people. Let me move to what the response is, what response is happening in the philanthropic world, and a little bit about advocacy.
Real quick, couple things. Coffee and Sarah have quick questions.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
We're going to try to wrap up the presentation about 5 minutes so we can get
absolutely.
a raw feeder.
I was just curious about the reduction in the HUD workforce.
Mm-hmm.
Is that already been implemented? Is that planned? Is that I've seen the 50% figure, but I'm trying to get my head around sort of.
Yes.
Has that already happened? Is it happening?
Let me see. Here we go. Yes, it is happening now. There are 4,800 employees being eliminated. Let's see. Let me go to this guy. The Office of Community Planning and Development is all but being eliminated, 84% of that workforce, and they're closing field offices. So the non-DC staff is being eliminated.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Sarah?
Okay. Okay. All right.
Okay. I'll do this in 2 minutes. It's like I can sing that song in 3 notes. Okay. So We're working with the county. Okay, so what should we do and what are funders doing? Number one thing I tell everybody is communicate. We don't want to leave a vacuum to be filled, and there are, 70% of organizations being impacted, half of nonprofits are spending significant time. Like, just talk to folks, even if you don't know what you're gonna do. We wanna reduce the uncertainty and increase the coalition, sense of coalition. Advocate. Here, I will give you this. C3s can do a lot. We can do a lot. All you can't do is say, vote for this person or vote for this legislation. Other than that, it's all fair game. So I think that is something to know, is that we have a voice and we need to use it. Another important thing is there are other folks developing platforms. So this idea of sign-on letters, of using other folks' information, that is a really good way to get information. And we're a net payer to the federal government. I'm sure you know, we pay more taxes than benefits receive. We're also among the last of the counties in the state of California in terms of benefits. Convene stakeholders, educate community members, educate elected officials. You've got some good ones, and we can build capacity. This is where funders are really aiming. Philanthropy, of course, cannot replace federal dollars, but what our philanthropic organizations are doing is providing rapid response funds where they can, convening nonprofits to have conversations about what their impacts are, equipping them with technical assistance, capacity building. These are lessons we learned during COVID, but in COVID it was all about how do we really equip our organizations to find and receive dollars. Now the orientation is how do we equip organizations to understand how to do financial planning, how to do sustainability planning, how to do contingency planning. So that is happening. And the funding groups are getting together on a weekly basis to make sure that we're reaching all corners of the region and all populations, in particular aiming for those folks who aren't already equipped to do this sort of planning, because we know that it's the smallest organizations that get hit the hardest, and they're the ones who are reaching the folks who are most in need. So with that, I will stop. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to both of you. I'm going to have Eric come up to the podium to a couple minutes just to give us additional stats from the county. And then I will go to public comment and turn it over. I think Angela had some specific things you might have wanted to cover, so we'll do it in that round. Okay, Eric, go ahead.
All right. Yeah, that was a lot to take in. First, I just want to note that we have been in contact with the county's government affairs team. But first, just want to note that specific federal impacts to the county. There was a memo that came out called "Potential Federal Funding Impacts to County Programs," and that was presented to the Board of Supervisors on February 10th of 2025. Which kind of goes over in detail some of the facts that I will be sharing. So one of the programs that has been impacted, and it's managed under Health and Human Services Agency, is the Work and Family Wellbeing Pilot. It's a federal program, and that recently was rescinded, which is no surprise based on what we just heard. The Housing Authority for the county, it manages about 13 of the incorporated cities, and their rental assistance programs and public housing programs. They actually have put away about $11 million in reserves just to anticipate a 5 to 14% reduction of housing choice vouchers. So those are pretty apparent impacts. Overall, again, this was on March 12th, so it's not everything inclusive of, which just happened with the budget extension bill that came through. So those are some things to consider, and I think even when it came to defense spending, we saw that go up by $6 billion. So those are some implications as there's reduction in other areas of the federal budget.
Appreciate it.
One
Go
thing I
ahead.
want to note, Megan, I think Catalyst is having their event, right, on the 25th?
Yes. Lots of events. Yes,
You look
there's
like me when you did tomorrow. I
Yes,
don't know.
we'll share that. It's 100 days, a briefing on the first 100 days of the administration. We're also going to Sacramento. I think Mr. Armstrong mentioned advocating in the state. So if you want to come with us April 1st and 2nd, you're more than welcome.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to check and see if there's any public comments for the item. No. Okay, Angela, I know you had some specifics that you wanted to go over as well, and then we'll turn over to other members.
Yeah, thank you. I was just this past week in Sacramento. We did a CDFI Advocacy Day yesterday at the state capitol, talking to legislators across California. And the day before that, I was at the California Coalition for Community Investment Summit. And so the continuing the reduction of the federal bureaucracy executive order was at the top of everybody's minds. Very urgent situation. The policy advocates who spoke had worked through the weekend on this because of the quick turnaround. Folks from these agencies are having to turn in information to the government by tomorrow. So they had 7 days to respond. So people were working really hard on it. It was, when it was announced, very concerning for everybody in CDFIs. And so it is a really urgent thing that's happening right now. But I did want to share some of what they had told us, because it did provide some reassurance to the CDFIs about what is potentially able to happen and what protections they think are in place to actually keep the work moving forward. So there is currently open a round of funding for financial assistance for CDFIs. The application closes tomorrow. It had opened mid-January. There was never any updates to the NOFA or the guidance, so they didn't change anything because of the executive orders that have occurred since then. And the president did sign the full year Continuing Appropriations and Extensions Act of 2025, which renewed CDFI funding at the fiscal year 24 level of $324 million. And so the folks that spoke were from the Opportunity Finance Network and LISC's national team, their policy people. And they did state with the CDFI fund, because it was passed by Congress through the Regal Act of 1994, they are pretty optimistic that there will not be significant reductions that can occur to the work that CDFIs and the CDFI fund are doing. So everyone's remaining hopeful. It is super important to advocate in the meantime. If you haven't been able to submit letters of support yet, the Opportunity Finance Network on their website, ofn.org, has templates that you can easily plug in information to support CDFIs, and so that those are in before tomorrow with the 7-day time limit. So that's on their Policy Action Center landing page.
Appreciate that information. Thank you. Any other members? Irene.
Yeah, no, thank you both for your presentation. I'm with the IRC, so I can feel the impact. I can say the statement that you read out there may have come from one of my colleagues at the IRC. The impact, as you can see, it's like a domino effect that's going down to everyone. One of the things that I can tell is that right after the inauguration, the first program that was impacted was the refugee resettlement. That was the first executive order that was signed, and we had some clients who were already scheduled to come in February. That was canceled. So how does that translate into the work that we do as an organization, from the social service all the way to economic development? It's that one thing that when you see the refugee resettlement or the recent migrants in refugees, you see them as like people who are coming, but these are people who are building the local economy. They come in, they receive those services that you have mentioned for the first 8 months, but then they go on to start businesses that build the local economy. So just wanted to appreciate the work, the advocacy, and this is not only for you, for everyone here to understand that if we have the CDFI work done, you're educating those businesses before they reach to the commercial bank, and that contributes to the local economy. And that's just what's happening. And then one other thing, Christina, when you're mentioning these people who are being impacted, the employees that are receiving this, they are now, you're seeing a lot of distress that may lead to mental health issues that is affecting the entire ecosystem. So it's not just happening because like these are non-profit people who do the work that often not really compensated at a high level, but then you're also seeing the impact coming into the families that also affecting their own well-being. So it's something that's very dear to my heart. As a former refugee myself, I understand the whole circle of how this impacts. So I just wanted to say thank you for the presentation.
I could just add that the State of Nonprofits report that you can find on the Nonprofit Institute website does show what the annual average salary is for nonprofit staff. And nonprofits have been working really hard in the past few years to increase those salaries. They are still below the level, the average salary is still below the level of sustainable income for San Diego County. And so just speaking to Irene's point.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to make it even more depressing, but it it's cyclical. So just from the county's perspective, even at a rally a couple of weeks ago, listening to some of the speakers that work for nonprofits that were also recipients of some of our services at the county that are going to be cut off for at least a certain number of people. And so that adds another layer as people need their physical well-being, their mental well-being is at stake here, and those resources and that safety net is also being pulled out. And so to your point about the actions and the coordination, the communication, anyone who knows me knows that I have a lot of complaints about my hometown, that is San Diego. But one thing that I have seen is that there is a desire to collaborate in these communities, and that it's always been more of a resource and coordination issue as opposed to a heart issue. And so I'm going to take that also on this UN Day of Happiness along with the action items, because either we try or we are not living anymore, in my opinion, right? And we have to try to do whatever we can to help each other. So that's where I'm coming from. And just real quick on the how much of a donor state we are. It's to the tune of about $83 billion that we give into the federal government that we don't get back in the state of California. So I just needed to say that. I didn't want to say it, but needed to say it. Anyone else? Yes, Jared.
Yeah, I just want to thank both speakers for their presentation because at CSA, San Diego County Fair Housing, we've been directly and severely impacted by everything that's going on. It's been my first couple of months as the executive director, and I've already lost 20% of my funding. And then we're expecting to lose maybe another 40% of additional federal funding. Hopefully, I'll know by April, and it's led to staff reduction and office size reduction as a way to contingency plan and make sure we can keep our staff funded or paid for the rest of the year so we can provide these services that we provide. But we do expect there to be an increase of homelessness and of discrimination in the rental market because of these funds. So, but I really appreciate the points that Megan said to, that's some of the things that we could do to like talk to folks, to advocate and to educate our elected officials, and it's something that we're doing currently. So thank you.
I have a question. I know one of the main things that I'm seeing is the mental health side around what's happening and really how to support our own staffs and really the community as a whole. Have you looked at any research on any of this? Is there anything going on in this space? I know it's probably a thing that's going to develop over time, but I'm curious if that work is happening.
So I'll just speak to the fact that, again, I might also just share the link with Daisy to the State of Nonprofits report. It is data that's about 9 months old, but there was a very high level of burnout that was experienced by staff and leadership last year before any of this happened. So it is compiling on that. And that can definitely be a question that we ask. As I mentioned, we're doing this biweekly survey panel, and so I'll definitely put that on the list of questions to ask about how it's impacting staff emotional well-being and burnout.
Can I ask a follow-up question on that as well? I know that our organization received that, and I personally did for our organization, but I would love to know if there is also an opportunity for our staff members to support in a way that maybe doesn't tell all of the financial aspects, but really says how they're feeling about their roles and the programs that they're supporting. I would be curious about that aspect versus the executive level.
Thank you very much.
And I think to your point, one of the things to think about is both how do we sustain critical services? We know it's not going to be at the level that it has been, but how do we think about the impacts on individuals? When we think about the hundreds, soon most likely in reality thousands of folks who have lost their jobs because they were funded through federal grants, what sort of retraining are we providing them? Are we tracking them? And for me, that is thinking about the long game, right? So I believe, and Angela, you might know this, that the 2020, the funding for the CDFI fund is secure through 2025, but that is the last year that it's guaranteed. And we have to remember, we're talking about multiple years. And so that's to me where the advocacy really becomes important, that we're making the changes we can. And the lawsuits are successful. Like it's been however many months, and these lawsuits are successful, but they only remain so if we have the support to the organizations that are bringing those lawsuits, we have the sign-on letters, et cetera, et cetera. So from a philanthropic standpoint, this idea of sustainability isn't just about financial sustainability. It's about how are we bringing folks together so that we can share resources, we can understand how people are doing, and provide alternate sources of support. I think back to the floods in January of last year, and one of the most important responses that were not organized nonprofits per se, but it was just folks coming in who had mental health experience, who could hold healing circles, who could provide places for folks to process their trauma. And I think when we think about disaster, this is a disaster for our communities, right? It's not a flood, it's not a fire, but it is a serious crisis that individuals are experiencing. And so we need to support the leaders who are sustaining organizations who may lose 60% of their staff. And we also need to support the folks in the communities and, coming together and saying, okay, maybe we have playbooks from behavioral health services, and we have a workforce that is qualified that's now unemployed. Are there ways that we can bring that together in collaboration across sectors, government, private sector, public sector, nonprofits all working together? And I think those are the sorts of things that philanthropy can step and say, okay, yeah, that's that scale, we can do that.
I'll just quickly add that we are working with several organizations that are small nonprofit organizations, under 500,000, under 5 staff. And so that's actually, as you saw, the majority of organizations right in the county. So I think bringing your expertise and skills to bear right now, this is the moment. And meeting the moment means making any information and skills that you have as accessible as possible. So for those in banking, small nonprofit organization leaders come in with a big heart, but without necessarily knowledge of how to find other sources of funding, not government, not foundations exclusively, but investments in other ways that they can really set up now things that might not help them in the short term in the 6 months, but will at least help them weather the next storm better. So this would be a great time to also bring those resources to them.
If y'all want to get together and start a payroll bridge loan fund, I am happy to help you do that.
We did have those collective projects before, so maybe that can be one during this time. I'm open. Any other members have any feedback? Peter?
So I'm really empathetic to all of the crisis that is happening and all of the individuals in San Diego that are being impacted. I'm looking at Jimmy, and I know that LISC and Enterprise had significant funding cut, just line item reductions and funding that they're providing technical assistance to the community. Obviously our refugee and immigrant communities are, super anxious. Our LGBTQ communities really nervous and anxious. So I don't want my comments to minimize any of those impacts in my empathy. No other than the Federal Open Market Committee met yesterday, right? And there hasn't been a whole lot of economic data that has come out over the last 60 or 90 days that would impact long-term economic outlook, except for this man-made crisis that is happening in DC. So this is what the Federal Open Market Committee said. They reduced long-term economic indicators and a number of things that we're all concerned about: inflation, unemployment, higher inflation, higher unemployment, and reduced their outlook, their estimate of economic growth for the remainder of 25 and 26, right? So what is happening in the market? It's really all the turmoil and lack of governance that's happening in DC. And so this change in economic wherewithal is going to impact all of us. I'm certainly, I'm working on starting construction on Wakeland's largest project ever, 190 units in Mission Valley, $150 million construction project, to serve 190 low-income families. Been planning this project for 5 years. And so all of this discussion about tariffs, all of this economic anxiety has a real impact. Thankfully, I think my project is going to do well. Thanks in part to LISC and some others that are participating in the project. But we're planning projects that are 5 years into the future today, and trying to make them work, and trying to partner with state and local and federal partners. So it's almost impossible to plan impossible to move forward and make decisions on projects in this environment of uncertainty. Our banking partners are anxious. They're sitting on their wallets to some extent. They are being very selective in the investments that they're making. And in part, it's a response to this change in Washington. And finally, the final thing I'll say is that, most of what I do is affordable housing. We're also partnering with service providers to build behavioral health capital improvement projects, sober living, mental health treatment beds. The state of California, voters of California last March approved Prop 1 that will make a lot of funding available for BCHIP projects, sober living, mental health treatment beds. We're partnering with the county and lots of others to try to get those funds in San Diego and build those projects. We're working with a lot of great nonprofit service providers. The state, planning. The hope is that they're going to be able to bill Medi-Cal, Medicare to operate those facilities. So the state has making billions of awards for these types of treatment facilities that are absolutely necessary. It's a rung that's missing in our housing ladder, our housing continuum, and our ability to operate those programs is going to be impacted by all of this turmoil, anxiety, budget cuts that is happening in the federal budget. So without a fully operational, and we can disagree about some policies, but without a functioning federal branch of government, it's hard for us to plan for tomorrow, much less 5 years from now. So that's.
It certainly will be a day-to-day kind of fight. Again, I said in the beginning of this meeting, we still have to think long-term, but on that dual track, there's also just daily needs that, the nonprofit world in particular is the most familiar with as far as what is the need for today, what do people need today, and we're going to have to kind of have our minds in both places. That's going to be super challenging, but that there will be everyday needs that people that have never had to. The thing is, my reflection on this is that I have, in 6 years being an elected official, been through 2 100-year events. Mm-hmm. What that means for me is, what did you learn from that? So as Megan said, this is a disaster. So what we've done in my office is pulled our briefing from the result of, what the county did and did not do during the floods. And looking at that and working off of that as somewhat of a template, more to come very later, of what is in my brain right now to help build out for this time. Because it's a disaster now. It's kind of a slow roll now, but I do think that it's going to hit hard and fast, very quickly, and to be prepared for that is the best we can, which also may be limited, but still some sort of preparation, some sort of plan, something to look to, is what I've learned in these 6 years. To major catastrophic events, I'm asking myself constantly every day, what did you learn, right? What can be deployed now, even with very, very, very limited resources? That's really just where I'm coming from, because it keeps happening and we're constantly on our heels, and, there has to be a better way, another way. So.
Madam Chair, can I just respond briefly to Peter? Two things. One is to note the California Healthcare Foundation is perhaps the only foundation in the state that's primary objective is to support an enhanced Medicaid. So if there are projects that you're doing or just a general interest in that, they have a lot of resources and advocacy for that in particular. The second is just a note on the notion that so far we haven't seen indicators of a drastic economic impact overall from these actions. That may well be true, and that may end up being true, but it's important that we look at that disaggregated data, because while the economy as a whole may fare all right when we look back in 5 or 10 years, there will be communities that are devastated. And we saw that the EDC, the regional EDC, did this for San Diego some number of years ago that showed, sure, GDP in San Diego was fine, but there were communities of color, lower income communities, single mothers, right, folks whose lives are devastated that get hidden in that data. So I think we just want to be careful about what metrics we're taking and how we think about where to target support and who maybe can help be a part of that solution.
I don't want to keep everyone here, but you bring up a very good point, and as you're speaking, my mind goes up in this, I don't know how to term it, in this environment of non-equity environment, with most organization that is doing this work have traditionally lied on this lens. I guess this is a question like, what do we do going forward as we try to, like you said, Christine, I think in the beginning, everything has changed, but the work is still there. How do we go to reach continuing to make sure that much as what's going at the national level does not change the need on the ground? It's a more rhetorical question, yeah.
Okay, if there's no response or no other questions or comments, we have a lot of work to do. We will continue to do it. And it's just last thing. This is what I was going to say as far as the economic outlooks are concerned. I think even with all of the turmoil that we have seen, and it has not yet necessarily hit some of the indicators, I just believe it will, because there is systems destruction, and as much as I've advocated for systems reforms, there's still these very ingrained safety nets that are being destroyed. And so, although I talk about this a lot at the county level, because most of the programs that we do administer are for our lower income, more vulnerable communities. But those are people that work in nonprofits. Those are people, that are contributing to our economy every single day. And when they are no longer able to do that, it's going to impact everyone. Mm-hmm. So I think that it's best to err on that side, even if the bottom does not fall out, so that we are prepared. Because if not, there's no, I'd rather be prepared and nothing happen than to not be prepared and kind of say everything's, not to say you're saying this, Peter, but everything's going to be okay, it's going to stabilize, and then it doesn't. So I think that's kind of the way that I'm taking in all of this information. Worst case scenario, which is oftentimes even, we had a HUD presentation. There's 110,000 people on the Section 8 list, and we were talking about the 11,000 that we serve. 11,000 people is a lot, but should that really be the top line at this point? Or should the top line be there are over 100,000 people on this list, and our systems do not, are not equipped, and we don't have enough housing to house everyone? That this is where the switch in our minds kind of needs to go, right? So, in my opinion. Anyway, okay. Thank you so much, everyone, for your participation. I will shut up now. Our next meeting is April 17th. We will be reviewing our bylaws and reinvestment plans, and we are adjourned at 10:58. Thanks so much, everyone.